I've changed my ideas on what autism is, and I hope that we can change them together as we speak about it. Most of the time, people think autism is like a disability of some sort, but I don't know. Over the years, the more research comes out, you start seeing things and the nuances around it. You start saying, let's learn a little bit more and open our minds up around child development. Let's talk a little bit about even adult development as well and what it looks like. So the conversations are slowly changing. The organizations that we have here in the studio that are creating that awareness around autism. So it is fantastic to actually be chatting to these ladies who are all here. I've got a 3-lady panel in front of me, so it's fantastic. I feel lucky, I feel blessed today to be the only guy in the conversation. So we're joined by Vezi, Silwanyana, and we also have Kgomotso Mmalegae and Khutso Malematja. Am I saying those right, guys?
Yes.
Almost there.
Almost there.
Okay, cool. Let me start with you, Vezi. Tell us a little bit about yourself. What do you do?
Okay, hi, good morning to everyone. So my name is Vezi Silwanyana, as Benjamin has already said. I run an organization called the Inam Autism Advocacy Group that started in 2018.
Cool.
I've got an autistic daughter that is 11 years old.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And then let's come to you. It's Mmalegae, am I saying?
Mmalegae,
Okay.
yes.
All right, cool. Tell us about yourself.
All right. Ke nna Kgomotso Mmalegae Moalusi. I am a mother wa Lesedi le Thabo.
Okay.
Twin boys, 12 years old, who are both autistic, extremely different from each other.
Yeah.
I am here in my capacity as the founding director of Active Autism and Neurodiversity Allyship Foundation. And what we do with this foundation is we are focusing on you, those who, and your sister, who are not living within the autism space. But by virtue of knowing about it, you want to amplify voices, you want to help. Because I think with a lot of disabilities, we're always trying to change our children to fit into the world. But I think on this journey, I've learned that we also got to do the work to prepare everybody else to engage with our children and include them and understand. Because as a parent, as you will say when we have the conversation, there's no time for self-pity on this one. You are the one who's got to come up and you got to do the advocating and speaking to the people. So that's what I do.
All right,
and I'm
awesome.
happy to be here.
I love the fact that you guys do so many different things. Khutso, what do you do? Remind us once again. You were with us last year when we're doing an Autism Awareness Month conversation. It's great to have you back.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about what you do.
So we run the organization, the Jigsaw Puzzle Academy, and we offer behavioral interventions to kids on the autism spectrum.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And then you didn't tell us what Imam does. Tell us a little bit what you guys do.
All right, so we're an advocacy group. When we started, we thought we could fix all the problems in the world regarding autism. And then we realized how complex it is.
Sure.
So at the core of what we do really is raising awareness around autism. Fantastic. And autism acceptance. We host workshops to educate society, schools, etc. Anyone really, like Kgomotso said, who is unaware of what autism is and its existence and prevalence. So our biggest drive, even though we've got 4 mission objectives, our biggest drive at the moment is awareness, and acceptance. Yeah.
All right, let's talk about autism. You know, I always want to go back in defining it because a lot of people think they know what it is, but I think redefining it over and over again asserts what it is. Vezi, can you tell us what it is?
So I hand that one over to Kgomotso.
We roll the dice on that. Okay. On medical terms, it is a neurological condition. And it is very important to say that because sometimes it is clubbed as a mental, this is psychological, but it's a neurological, which means it is the workings of the brain, how the brain works, the chemical balance, and etc. I like to use simpler terms. It's the communication from the brain to the rest of your bodies. Now, communication in our space is what you're doing. We're speaking. We think that is the only way of communicating. But in essence, we actually speak through our senses. Taste, smell, hear, sight, touch. And then in the side of autism, you then get introduced to vestibular, your sense of balance,
Ah.
your proprioception, where am I as opposed to the table. So with autistics, it's 8 different things that they struggle with. And because of how they process information, they then engage with the world differently. We see it in them not speaking or them reacting to certain things. And just the last example, also in simplifying, I always say to people, you and I hear a song and we hear the full song.
Sure.
Take autism as in somebody who hears the song, but hears the bass, the drums, the piano, the everything separately and processes it
Differently.
one by one.
Sure.
And that is the communication we're speaking about.
Fantastic. Okay.
Thank you.
I love that example because it brings me back to this question that I was talking about when I was introducing this conversation. Is it a disability? Is it a disability? Because most people deal with it like a disability, but the more you interact with autistic children, autistic adults, it doesn't feel like a disability. It feels like something different. I don't know. How do you guys see it?
If I could just finish off on that one. It is and it isn't.
Okay.
Like most disabilities, somebody can say, I'm paraplegic, but that is not my personality. The difference with autism is it is the prism through which our children experience the world. And that in itself kind of disables. And it disables in the sense that we live in a world where we're meant to be neurotypical. There's a normal way of doing things. So it does disable. Because the example you're saying that when you engage, and I'm going to also close the other pathway that people would go, when we engage, and then so-and-so also has it, and then there's also genius. All of those things are there, yes. Yes. But it makes it difficult. We live in a world that doesn't like weird, and weird people are then shut out, and that is disabling. That is highly disabling. And
so it's also our response as a society that disables people with autism, right? I would think that could be another way of looking at it. Okay, I've got 3 beautiful women in the room, and I want to talk a little bit about being 3 women with children with autism. How did you guys interact with that initially? How was your first experience, Vezi?
Well, my first experience, so just to give you a bit of background, Inam was diagnosed at about 18 months.
That's your daughter, right?
My daughter, yeah.
Sure.
So 18 months going on to 2 years. What happened was she had reached all her milestones. She had started developing a bit of speech, and then come 18 months, she completely regressed. She stopped talking. She started babbling like a baby. She started flapping her hands in front of her face. She would rock back and forth in her chair. And that's when we figured, in a feeding chair, that's when we figured something is not right, especially with the speech regression. So then we started doing our homework. I went to Dr. Google, which is possibly the worst thing to do.
Really?
Okay. Yeah, it gives a lot of information, but there's also misinformation, right? So we started on a journey and went to various medical professionals and finally got the diagnosis. So I didn't know about autism until Inam got the diagnosis. I must tell you, I was gutted. I couldn't believe it because I was told by one of the medical professionals that she may never talk again and she'll need assistance for the rest of her life. So as a mother, discovering that, it kind of feels like, because you always have hopes and dreams for your children. I've got 3 other children. And when you are told that this is what is going to happen for the rest of her life, it just kills the dream, you know, because we all have, you know, a level of aspiration for our children. So I got depressed. I got absolutely clinically depressed. I am still on antidepressants because it's a very tough journey for most. I guess, you know, we all experience it differently, but there's also a sense of going through the 5 stages of grief. Well, first it's denial, you know, it can't be, and then you go through all the stages until you get to acceptance, and that took me a good 3-4 years to accept that Inam is autistic. And this is, they say once you're autistic, you are autistic, and that's the rest of your life. Yeah.
All right, we'll talk a little bit about that. I want to engage with that subject matter of grief. What does it actually mean? Because I had another lady we were speaking to last week, and they have this autism magazine, and they speak about parents dealing with their grief and dealing with the difficulty of engaging with a child with autism, and I think like that also should be normalized, that grief and the difficulty to process, because sometimes we guilt trip people for feeling that way. So we'll talk a bit about it after our break. Well, let's take a break. It is Autistic Awareness and what is it, Acceptance Month?
Yes.
Autistic Awareness and Acceptance Month, and I love the acceptance
Absolutely.
part of it. That's a very important part. We'll talk a little bit more after the break. We're speaking to Vezi, Kgomotso, and Khutso, all of them with us in our studio to chat a little bit about autism. They all have different organizations that they work in. They're mothers who work in this particular space. I also want to speak a little bit about that. Let me come to you, Khutso, in terms of that. Being a parent and dealing with this, difficult moment where you're like, oh, my child has autism, especially because as Black people, autism is new to us. I think it's not new to us, actually. We just misinterpreted it historically. We were like, my child has been bewitched, or there's so many stereotypes around how people engage with it, whether personally or the community around them. How did you engage with it initially?
So just to clear, I'm not a parent.
Okay, sure.
So I do work with the kids.
But
so
in terms of you as a practitioner, let me rephrase it, because I thought so. As a practitioner, how did you then discover autism and working with parents in autism? And what are the biggest challenges for parents?
So I discovered, I think, like 13 years ago
Wow.
when I started. And for me, initially, it was a shock.
Sure.
Like, I was like, okay, where does this belong? How do you get it? And it was like this little paragraph in my varsity. So as you go with it, you learn.
What were you studying?
Psychology.
Okay.
Psychology. So I just had like a little paragraph of what autism is. And then when you get into it, it's like the paragraph does no justice to what you're learning. And with every kid, I think the biggest thing to understand with autism is that every kid is different. Autism doesn't, what autism is, what the textbook says, what everybody says is not just one kid. Mm-hmm. What the textbook says might be for one kid, but there's 3 other kids that are completely different to it. Yeah. And that's what I had to learn. And it's like, okay, I had this kid who was autistic, and I look at the other kid, I was like, why are you autistic? I don't see it. But it was like, the autistic spectrum is so, it's like a rainbow. He was on the one side and they were on the other side, but they were still under it. So that's the other thing that I think also people need to understand, that it's so broad. It's not just because he can talk, he can have a proper conversation, he's going to school, he's like, oh no, that child doesn't have autism. But there's those other aspects that everybody doesn't look at. Dealing with parents, I think for me, that was the hardest thing. I relate a lot better to children because I know what I'm doing with kids. And then for parents, it's like, I don't always know what to say. So I try not to do, like, I'll give the advice, I'll do whatever I need to do, but I normally stay away from advising parents on, oh, I know what you're going through, try this, because at the end of the day, they've got so many people saying, oh, you're doing this, or maybe you should do this differently. You've got families saying, maybe you should have done this while you're pregnant and stuff like that. And I'm like, okay, you don't need any more pressure from me. I'm just there to do what I need to do. And you've got a lot of organizations that help mothers and parents going through that. So, yeah, that's the difficult part.
Yeah, Kgomotso, your aspect, did you also find it difficult to accept?
Extremely. As Vezi was speaking, I actually wrote down my words. There's guilt, there's despair, there's horror. You want to retreat. You feel condemned. You feel, like family can save you. Family can save you or condemn you in this space. And I was a single parent, right? And Vezi had her, to show you how different it is, as Khutso is saying. I have twin boys. Okay. Their diagnoses are 5 years apart. Wow. Lesedi and Letabo are vastly different. So I went through that thing. I had boys, they were premature. You go at that point where conversation must start. Also, I was a first-time parent. So what are you seeing? What are you not seeing? And you told, no, they're boys. Boys are slow. Oh, they're prems, extra slow. And they're twins. Oh, add 8 months onto that to get to some of those spaces. Wow. So for me, the diagnosis or the initial thing about autism came from preschool, where the preschool lady was saying, this is autism, because she would send me videos of my child, and he would be screaming or you know, or have his hands over his ears. So the symptoms are very different. And now with the knowledge I know, when I go back, I actually see it. I see those nights of not sleeping. This child who you're sleeping with as a baby, and they're all over the bed. All over the bed the whole night. And I was like, you know, I had twins, I was just tired. The fact that Letabo doesn't want to play, you're like, okay, let me concentrate on one child and not the other. The different crawling. Sometimes you thought it was cool, your child would do like a backward thing. You're like, what is that? Guess what? It's part of autism.
Okay.
The food things and aversions to certain things. Now you understand what that was. Letabo's always played on the periphery of other kids. Not necessarily. You buy a toy car and all he wants is the wheel.
Okay.
So those are some of the things. But also in presentation, also in presentation, you're also thinking, Letabo is 12 years old. He still does not speak.
Okay.
Right? Lesedi does speak. And like also the balance as a parent, I'm a single parent, where people would think, but listen, he's not necessarily autistic, and he is. I know it, knowing that, because people forget that your child can memorize the encyclopedia and struggle with brushing his teeth or tying his shoes or understanding that, yes, we like this girl and she's talented, but we don't hug all talents that we meet, all babies. So even some of the stigma comes from a lot of misconception. Sometimes when we keep our kids home, it's not because we're ashamed. If I could tell you the many days you literally have to, you know, scupper around and be like, no.
Don't
He's
touch.
not a bad child. And also,
really?
let's help you. Our kids are gorgeous.
Yeah.
Gorgeous.
Yeah.
I am yet to meet an autistic kid who has Kgomotso. Yeah, so good. So,
There's no child who has Kgomotso.
This is true.
That's debatable.
This is very true. So what happens when you engage and the child is acting in a way that people are not expecting? Nothing about what you see in the child can you see that. It's only when you're there for a while that you see the behavior that something is up. So you deal with people thinking, oh, ngwana hana molao, hey, Kgomotso ba dikolo tsa makgowa, le godisitse bana yang mare, oh, lo mntwana ya ganga, you name it, all of these things get thrown. And as a parent, because also, here's the other kicker with autism, is the fact that it's not just a psychologist or a therapist or a neuro, whatever that you would go to. I have learned they must have a specific interest or knowledge or speciality in autism, or else they could waste your time too.
All right, we're about to wrap up this wonderful conversation, but we're going to go into a little bit of depth in terms of what we think are the misperceptions around autism. We've been speaking about Autism Awareness Month. I've got Vezi, Kgomotso, and Khutso with us to chat a little bit about it. Let's talk a little bit about the point that you made around how people respond to autism, especially to children with autism. I think as Black communities, we've always had autism in our environments. We just didn't know. So we thought it was either witchcraft, or we thought like children are super slow, or we thought it was a traditional thing of a child being like disabled, for instance. And it's not necessarily the same. I don't think it's a physical disability. I still don't think so, because I see recovery happening in some children. Some children are changing their behavior due to medication and also to certainty training and therapy. So we'll come to you around that. But let's talk a little bit about those stereotypes, Vezi.
Yeah. So I think it's a very good point that you make. As part of what we do as an organization, we have focused on townships and rural areas, predominantly under-resourced areas, which are made up of Black people, the Black community. And I don't want to racialize this conversation, but what we found is that there's so many misconceptions in the Black community. I don't know how many people told me to do msebenzi. No, maybe the child was bewitched, going to your point. So
how do you respond to that when people do say your child is bewitched, and it's actually an insult to a certain degree?
No, it is.
Feels like it.
It is, but you know, when you're in the when you're beginning this process, I think as a parent, because you're so desperate, I didn't really go the witchcraft route. But when someone said, no, just do msebenzi, or if we go to a prayer session, or do whatever, things will get better. So a lot of parents are in a point of desperation to try a lot of things, anything to make this go away, if I can say it in that way. So with our community, I just feel that it's so unfortunate that a lot of parents or caregivers, etc., because they're in denial or they don't understand autism. And I wish autism had an African word to it, because it sounds so complicated and it sounds a bit white. If I should say it frankly, like that. So you find situations, and I think we've all read about it, where kids are taken to their grannies or whatever. They're locked in the house because there's a sense of shame. Shame. I don't want the community to see my child in the way that they behave, because they may behave differently to other children. So yes, that sense of shame and a lot of misconceptions on what autism is. And then lastly, because of the work that we've done and all the workshops that we've done, we have found that it's so important, and that's why awareness is such a big thing. The more you bring awareness to the existence and the prevalence of autism in these communities, then hopefully we'll get a level of acceptance and the support that we need, so that our children are not discriminated against or locked up at home and don't get to interact with other children.
Let's speak about therapy and medication. I don't know if autistic kids get medicated. I'm not sure if they only get therapy, or does it depend on the spectrum. Can you tell us a little bit about dealing with it in a way that's progressive?
Okay, so medication-wise, there is medication. Some kids are on medication, some kids are not on medication. Kids that do go to school, there's some schools that will say, okay, we need your kid on medication. Doesn't always help the kid, but it helps them function at school. So
what kind of medication?
So I know it's like Ritalin, Risperdal. So it basically just calms the child down. Okay, and that's the school's way of coping with the child.
Would you recommend that?
I'd rather not comment.
Okay, still controversial.
Yes, I'd rather not comment on that. Sure. But so schools find a way to just deal with the child, and when there's no medication, it's like, we can't take your kid. So that's another thing of school is another subject on its own. Interventions, there's a lot of interventions. We've got behavior interventions, you've got play interventions, sensory interventions, you've got stem cells. But
okay, slow down. Behavior interventions.
Okay, so this is what I do. So I'm a behavioralist, right? So we come in as we there to deal with the problem behavior. Now, first of all, what I want to say is that not every child needs an intervention. Not every child has to have a therapy, right? Some kids, you just change the environment, they can function, they can be okay. You've got your levels, level 1, level 2, level 3. Some kids just need a change in the school they're going to, and the environment works for them. Some kids need the intervention. So behavior-wise, I always say to parents, I'm not there to change your child. I'm not there to change somebody like, okay, we want they to come here and change you. We're there to change the problem behavior. And the problem behavior is a behavior that interferes with your way of learning, interferes with your life. If you're going to school, you can't be screaming the whole day, right? So we are there to try and get rid of the screaming. So
give us an example of
maybe, an example of would be like every parent wants the child to go to school.
Give us of one child. One example of one child, so we understand.
One child goes to school, and every time they get to school, they scream because they don't know how to. Communication is a problem, right? Problem behavior is, I'm at school, I'm screaming. You cannot scream at school because one, you're interfering with other kids' learning. Two, you're not learning anything. You're not gaining anything. So that's interfering with your life. How we would come in is, okay, our plan there is to get rid of that screaming. To get rid of that screaming is, we need to give you a replacement for that. Replacement is communication. How can you better communicate what you want? How can you better communicate, I don't like this, I don't like that? Because if you can communicate better, the screaming is out. You get to learn what you're going there for.
So what would you say to the child? What would you physically do to change that pattern?
So it depends. Every child is different. You get vocals.
I said one child.
Okay, our child is non-speaking, right? Sure. Non-speaking. We've got we'll use a device. We'll use a AAC. So they've got an iPad and they've got a speech there. So whatever they want, that's their voice. So instead of me screaming because the door's open, I can just put there and say door. You already know I want the door closed. I'm not screaming. I'm telling you nicely. That's their voice. So that's what we want to come in and try and change. We're not changing the child. We're just changing the behavior so that they can also be a part of, like most kids, and also have an opportunity to live their life as well.
All right, so there are different forms. You said
Yes.
there's behavioral. What other ones?
So you get your play therapy.
Okay.
You get your sensory. Some
Mhm.
kids need more sensory than they need behavior.
Okay.
Some kids prefer play. So play in the sense that they don't learn at a table. You can't put most kids at a table to teach them.
Mhm.
Most kids will be like, okay, I can learn my ABCs on the floor and I do perfectly. Whatever you
Mhm.
give me at the table, I can do it perfectly on the floor. So that's another sense of therapy.
Okay. I want us to wrap it up in a sense of looking at the positive elements, because some parents could see this as a downward spiral of work. But this work has merits to it and good outcomes. Have you guys seen any behavioral changes in your young ones?
Yeah.
Have you seen some improvements? Have you seen some things you're like, okay, you know what? I can work with this.
Yeah. So, if I may answer that quickly from my perspective, in actual fact, Khutso has worked with my daughter for the longest time.
Okay.
8 years.
8 years,
Wow.
yes. 8 years. So, I think we've seen, a lot of progress over the years. She's at a point where her speech is developing. She can say, she can request for things, just a sentence.
It's better than a shout.
It's better than a shout and a scream, yes. So she's able to communicate her needs now. And this is through the interventions that Abu Khutso brought in. She's able to brush her teeth. She couldn't brush her teeth. I'll give you an example of even using the toilet. They had to actually train her and create pictures in the bathroom of the steps when you use the toilet. So now she can do it independently.
Oh, fantastic.
So there is, I guess, again, it differs from child to child, but personally, I've seen a lot of, in the 8 years, there's been a lot of developments. So it's not the end of the world. Again, differs from child to child.
Sure.
But with interventions, you do kind of see, a bit of,
And
progress.
is it not expensive, all this stuff?
Very.
Tell us a little bit about it.
All right, I'm gonna take liberty, but I'm watching your time. I'm gonna backtrack a bit.
Okay, quickly.
With some of the things that you said.
Okay.
Now, yes, it gets better, but I think we must always, especially when we're talking to people, get back to facts. Autism is not curable.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
The processing of information, what I speak, that can never be switched off. It is part of who they are.
Mm-hmm.
So some of the therapies, and I think a lot of parents miss this, and then they end up going to all sorts of schools and losing, because you are paying anything from 800 in a public school to 29,000 at some of these private
Wow.
spaces, and some are promising you huge things.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the first: there is no cure. Anybody who promises to cure your child is talking.
Lying.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that is the thing. That is the thing.
That's a safe
That
one.
is not gonna go right.
Yeah.
It's not curable. Regression is part of the journey, because when you are processing things. So, for example, I'm gonna have one child. Right now, I'm a bit tense because my boys are approaching teenage years.
Oh, cool.
Right? Cool. No. Because as you know, when we were growing up, our parents talked about the beans were jumping, the hormones were coming in.
Yes.
And I'm not just talking about erections and things like that. Now, if you're somebody who processes information in a heightened or lessened way, that feeling is going to be a problem. That feeling of getting erect, that feeling of a girl and us, even we feel it. You can feel your flow between the heavy. Now, an autistic child is going to struggle because this is a feeling that is distracting.
So you need to start
And then
communicating.
you're communicating. No. It cannot be that. And remember, communicating with our kids is not just speaking. It's pictures.
Ish.
It's repeating.
Yeah, it's a
Now
lot.
imagine a teenage
So I've also
girl
been very stereotypical
who's
of
having
dealing
a
with it,
flow, and a flow goes lighter and heavier. There's the smell. There is the feel of a pad or a tampon. All of those things are huge things. And when you cannot communicate in a way that people do it, what are you going to do? You're going to throw things out. So that screaming is, I like the word behavior, but I don't like the word behavior because it speaks to what we experience as parents and the rest of you. And then we call it inappropriate and difficult behavior because we don't understand what is being communicated. And I think one of the beautiful things for me on this parenting journey is it forces you to be very observant. But that's tiring. It's a lot of job.
You just made it more
because you got to pick up.
Yeah, you made it more complicated, and we have to wrap it up, unfortunately. But let's talk a little bit about your organizations as well, and maybe make reference so people can go to all these spaces. I know you all do very cool stuff, and it's important for people to go to all those platforms. So let's start with you, Vezi, and then just reintroduce yourselves again and your platforms.
All right. Again, our organization is the NAM Autism Advocacy Group,
So it's
named after NAM.
Yeah, it's spelled
INAM.
Sure.
Yes. You
So
can
it's
find
INAM
us
Foundation.
NAM Autism
Okay.
Advocacy Group.
Oh,
Yes.
INAM
Autism
Advocacy Group. Okay.
And we're available on social media. That's where a lot of our activity is. So you can find us at INAM Foundation. On Instagram, that's mostly where we communicate a lot of things. So if we're having events, workshops, or any promoting. So what I love about this community is that we all work together.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, Kgomotso is going to have, an event very soon, and we publish it on our platform. So yeah.
Okay, cool. And yours?
So we are the Jigsaw Puzzle Academy. You can find us Facebook, Instagram, and on our website, www.tjpacademy.co.za.
Fantastic.
All right. Kgomotso, we are long name under Autism Neurodiversity Allyship
What is it?
Foundation. It's the Active Autism and Neurodiversity Allyship Foundation.
Sure.
But everywhere else it is Autism Allyship. And allyship is we're looking to create spaces, safe spaces. So I'm trying to show everybody that you are an ally.
Mm-hmm.
You are here amplifying.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody else could be a sponsor, not in giving things, as in I would assist. She's a sponsor. She's helping our children or taking the voices out. And we want to regain quality of life for our children.
Yeah.
So I want in the future, in a good 10 years or so, God's ears, this fingerprint, because I have a fingerprint and a brain as our logo.
Cool.
And why? Because like a fingerprint and a brain, autism is unique to everybody.
All right.
And we would like you to see this logo in any place you go to, restaurant, shop, whatever, you must know they are willing to do the work to include our children and make the space
I love it.
user-friendly.
Fantastic.